James and Emily were an admired couple in the eyes of everyone around them. They lived in a charming two-story house in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. The house, with its cream-colored walls and a quaint front yard filled with flowers, seemed to symbolize family happiness. Emily, with her gentle demeanor and warm smile, lovingly cared for their two children, Lucas and Sophie. Lucas, a 9-year-old with bright, intelligent eyes, loved sports, while Sophie, a 6-year-old, adored dancing and dreamed of becoming a ballerina. To their neighbors, their life appeared perfect. Emily, an elementary school teacher, loved her job. Every morning, she woke up early to prepare breakfast for her family, a small joy she cherished in her daily routine. James, a marketing director for a prestigious advertising firm, was ambitious and dedicated to achieving success in his career. At the same time, he was a loving father and devoted husband. In the evenings, the family often gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories about their day. Lucas would excitedly talk about his latest achievement with the school soccer team, while Sophie enthusiastically performed a new ballet routine she had learned in class. James and Emily exchanged smiles, their hearts swelling with happiness as they watched the innocence and joy of their children. However, behind the smiles and the picture-perfect family moments, there were things Emily hadn't noticed, subtle changes in James's behavior and the growing silences between them. Despite his efforts to appear cheerful around his family, James was feeling the heavy weight of pressure from work. Each day, he faced major advertising campaigns, tense meetings, and high expectations from his company. Emily, too, sensed that something was different, but she tried to convince herself that everything was fine. It's just the busy work schedule, she thought. Yet, the nights when James came home late or failed to respond to her messages left her feeling uneasy. Even so, she didn't want to add to his burdens, knowing how much pressure he was already under. Over time, the changes in James and Emily's family life became increasingly apparent. James no longer came home on time as he used to, and family dinners were now often just the three of them, Emily and their two children. Emily tried not to feel disheartened, but James's absence left an undeniable void in her heart. He frequently excused himself, saying that work had become too demanding and he needed to stay late at the office to complete major projects. One evening, after dinner, as Emily was tidying up the kitchen, Lucas suddenly asked, "Mom, why is Dad coming home late so often? Doesn't he want to watch me play soccer anymore?" His question caught Emily off guard. Forcing a smile, she replied, "Dad's just busy with work. Lucas, once he's done, he'll be there to cheer you on again." But after giving that answer, she felt a quiet sadness wash over her. Meanwhile, James was also feeling a growing distance between himself and his family. The pressures of work were draining the joy he once found in family life, and he sensed himself becoming increasingly disconnected from Emily. Though he knew Emily was doing her best to maintain their connection, James felt that he lacked the energy to reciprocate. He began to feel that he couldn't share his worries and stresses with her, fearing it would only add to her concerns. The tension from work made James feel like a machine that never stopped. He yearned for a change, a sense of renewal to escape the suffocation he felt. Then, on an ordinary day at the office, he met Ashley, a newly hired colleague in the company's marketing team. Ashley was a young woman with confidence and energy, qualities that immediately caught James's attention. Ashley had a unique charm, not just in her attractive appearance but also in her confidence and magnetic demeanor. Her radiant smile and cheerful energy stood in stark contrast to the exhaustion James often felt when he came home. Having recently moved from New York to Denver for work, Ashley was assigned to James for guidance during her first days at the company. Initially, their conversations revolved around work, but over time, they began sharing more personal stories. Ashley talked about her life in New York, the parties she attended, and the trips she had taken. Through her stories, James felt as if he was reliving the youthful excitement he had long since left behind. He found himself drawn to her carefree and adventurous spirit. One afternoon, after wrapping up a particularly stressful meeting, Ashley invited James out for coffee. He hesitated at first but eventually agreed. At a cozy cafe near the office, they sat and chatted, with Ashley's laughter filling the warm space. James felt a sense of relief, as if the burdens of his life had momentarily lifted. Ashley complimented him, calling him an incredible man, and openly expressed her admiration for him. James began spending more time with Ashley. Late nights at work became an excuse for them to see each other more often. He felt understood and appreciated in her presence, something he hadn't felt in his marriage with Emily for a long time. Initially, James told himself it was just a friendly relationship between colleagues, but he soon realized he was developing feelings he could no longer ignore. The relationship between James and Ashley grew increasingly close. They started having lunch together, occasionally taking walks after work, and sharing stories that had nothing to do with their jobs. Ashley had a way of making James laugh and forget about the stresses of his life. Her presence felt like a fresh breeze in his life, making him feel youthful and full of energy again. One evening, after completing a major project, James and Ashley decided to celebrate with dinner. They went to a small restaurant with dim lighting that created an intimate and romantic atmosphere. They talked and laughed, and James found himself captivated by Ashley's gaze. In that moment, all thoughts of family and responsibility seemed to fade away. After dinner, as they stood outside the restaurant, Ashley leaned in and gently kissed James on the cheek. James was caught off guard, but he couldn't deny the quickened pace of his heartbeat. He knew it was wrong, yet the temptation was too strong to resist. They looked at each other for a moment before James responded with a kiss of his own. It was a moment that changed everything. He knew he had crossed the line of loyalty to Emily. After that kiss, James and Ashley began a secret affair. James was fully aware that what he was doing was wrong, but he couldn't stop himself. The excitement and newness that Ashley brought into his life made him forget about the pressures of work and the cracks in his marriage. Every time he was with Ashley, he felt like a different person, free and unburdened by heavy responsibilities. Meanwhile, Emily remained unaware of what was happening. She continued to do everything she could to maintain the happiness of their family, preparing dinners and taking care of their children. She had no idea that James had started living a separate life, one in which she had no place. James knew that what he was doing was wrong, but he had been swept up in a whirlwind of passion and temptation from which he could not pull himself away. To maintain his secret relationship with Ashley, he had to lie to Emily every day. The fabrications piled up, and over time, they became a familiar part of his life. Each evening when James came home late, he always had an excuse: work deadlines, extended meetings, or client dinners. Emily, though sensing that something wasn't right, tried her best to trust him. She wanted to believe that James was working hard for their family, for the future of their two children, and that everything was still under control. However, the changes in James's behavior became increasingly apparent. He no longer smiled when he walked through the door, and the good morning hugs and kisses had become rare. Instead, he was always in a rush, seemingly avoiding Emily. The evenings spent watching movies together or taking the kids for walks in the park were a thing of the past. James would always blame work, but in reality, he was spending that time with Ashley. One evening, after putting Lucas and Sophie to bed, Emily sat in the living room, gazing out the window with a distant look in her eyes. She reminisced about the early days of her relationship with James. They used to take long walks in the park, talk all night, and never grow tired of each other. But now, the silence between them had stretched for too long. Emily felt as though she was slowly losing the man she had once loved. Meanwhile, James was at Ashley's small apartment near the office. They cooked together, talked, and James felt at ease in her presence. With Ashley, he could laugh and forget his worries and pressures. He didn't have to play the role of the perfect husband or responsible father. He was simply a man seeking comfort and joy. The relationship between James and Ashley grew deeper, and it began to affect James's life. He spent less time with his family, and even when he was home, his mind was often preoccupied with thoughts of Ashley. He no longer remembered the promises he had made to Emily or cared about her expectations. The more Emily tried to get close to James, the more suffocated he felt and the more he wanted to distance himself from her. One evening, after dinner, Emily suggested that James take the family out to see a new movie that Lucas and Sophie were excited about. But James declined, claiming he had to work late. Emily felt disappointed but didn't want to argue in front of the children. She took them to the movie without him. While Emily and the kids were sitting in the theater, James and Ashley were at an upscale restaurant, enjoying dinner together. They laughed and talked freely, without needing to hide or worry about being seen. Ashley, with her charm and attentiveness, made James feel special. She complimented him, telling him he was an incredible man, and James couldn't help but feel a sense of pride at her words. When Emily returned home, she was met with an empty, cold house. She barely recognized it anymore. The laughter and stories that once filled the space before dinner seemed like distant memories. She felt as though she was losing James, and the loneliness began to consume her, even with her 2 children by her side. James's absence felt like an unfillable void. Emily began to notice increasingly clear signs of a shift in her relationship with James. He became more secretive, shared less with her, and constantly avoided her questions. Some nights, James came home with an unfamiliar perfume lingering on his clothes, or he received calls that he answered briefly before hanging up. Emily felt as though she were lost in a maze filled with unanswered questions and growing confusion. One evening, when James said he had to work late, Emily decided to check his phone. Her heart pounded as she discovered a message from Ashley. "I miss you so much. Hope we can see each other tonight." In that moment, Emily felt her heart shatter. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. James, the husband she had trusted, was betraying her. Emily tried to stay calm, determined not to lose control. She knew that if she confronted James right away, he might deny everything, and she would have no way to prove it. Instead, she decided to wait and observe. She wanted to uncover the full truth before making any decisions. Over the next few days, Emily paid closer attention to James's behavior. She noted his words, gestures, and actions. She discovered that James frequently went out at unusual times, and when she asked him about it, he always claimed it was for work. Emily's suspicions grew stronger with each passing day, and she knew she had to take action. Emily couldn't take it anymore. One morning, after James left for work, she decided to follow him. She rented a car and trailed James's car from a distance, keeping enough space to avoid being noticed. She watched as James turned into another neighborhood and stopped in front of a small apartment. He stepped out of the car, and there she was, Ashley, waiting by the door. They shared a kiss before walking inside together. Emily felt her heart shatter. She was overwhelmed with anguish as tears streamed uncontrollably down her face. She didn't know what to do, sitting in her car, staring at the scene in disbelief. She wanted to rush out, confront James and Ashley, but she couldn't summon the courage. Instead, she drove back home, her mind in complete turmoil. That night, when James returned home, Emily tried to act normal, but inside, a storm of emotions was raging. She felt anger, pain, and profound disappointment. She wanted to scream, to confront James about everything he had done. But she knew doing so in front of the children would only make things worse. The next day, Emily decided to consult a lawyer. She needed to understand her rights and prepare for what lay ahead. She didn't want her children to endure any more pain, but she also couldn't continue living in this web of deceit. Sitting across from the lawyer, Emily felt both terrified and resolute. She knew this decision would change her life and her children's lives forever, but she saw no other way forward. James remained unaware that Emily had discovered everything. He continued his double life, oblivious to the fact that the foundation beneath him was crumbling. But Emily, with the love and determination of a mother, was preparing for a confrontation. She knew she needed to be strong, not just for herself, but for her two little children who depended on her. The tension within Emily grew with each passing day, like an overinflated balloon ready to burst. She knew the truth, had seen James and Ashley with her own eyes, and now she wanted to address everything once and for all. However, confronting James wasn't an easy step. Their two children, Lucas and Sophie, were Emily's world, and she understood that any decision she made would deeply affect their lives. One evening, when James came home after another late night at work, Emily decided it was time to confront him. She waited until Lucas and Sophie were tucked into bed, then invited James into the living room. She sat on the sofa, her expression calm but resolute, her gaze fixed on him. "We need to talk," Emily said, her voice steady but serious. James saw the determination in her eyes and immediately sensed that something was wrong. He sat down across from her, trying to maintain his composure. "What do you want to talk about?" James asked, though unease was already creeping into his voice. Emily didn't answer immediately. She pulled out her phone and showed him photos she had taken of James and Ashley kissing in front of her apartment. James's face changed instantly as he stared at the images. "James, I want you to be honest with me," Emily said, her voice strained as she fought to keep her emotions in check. "You're betraying me, aren't you? You're in a relationship with her, aren't you?" James remained silent, his face a mix of guilt and confusion. He knew there was no way to deny it anymore. Lowering his head to avoid Emily's piercing gaze, he finally spoke. I'm sorry, Emily," James said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong. I don't know what to say other than that I'm sorry." Emily felt as though her heart was shattering into pieces. She had prepared herself for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the pain it brought. Tears began streaming down her face uncontrollably, and she didn't try to stop them. "Why, James? Why would you do this to me and the kids?" she asked, her voice choked with anguish. James looked up, his eyes filled with regret. "I have no excuse, Emily. I felt exhausted, overwhelmed by work and life. And then Ashley came into the picture, and she made me feel appreciated. But it was a mistake. I destroyed everything. And I know I've hurt you." Emily shook her head, unable to accept his explanation. "Do you have any idea how much I've done to keep this family together? James, do you have any idea how hard I've tried to trust you?" she said, her voice breaking with sorrow. "I loved you, I trusted you, and you betrayed that trust." After the intense confrontation, Emily decided that she and James needed to take some time apart to think more clearly about what had happened. She asked James to leave the house temporarily so she could reflect on their future. Although heartbroken, James understood that it was necessary. He agreed and moved into a nearby hotel. The days that followed were filled with pain and loneliness for both of them. James felt the profound loss of his family. Each morning, waking up in the cold, impersonal hotel room, he missed the sound of Lucas's laughter or Sophie's sweet singing as she got ready for school. He missed Emily, the mornings when she prepared breakfast for the family, her gentle presence even amidst the growing distance between them. James began to feel the emptiness of a life without Emily and the kids. He saw Ashley a few times after moving out, but things between them were no longer the same. James realized he didn't want to be with Ashley anymore. Their meetings, which once brought him excitement and joy, now left him with only a sense of emptiness and guilt. Meanwhile, Emily was enduring her own struggles. She had to cope with the pain of betrayal while also keeping Lucas and Sophie from sensing that something was wrong. She tried to smile each day and maintain a semblance of normalcy for her children. But at night, when she sat alone in the quiet, empty house, the loneliness and heartache overwhelmed her. She wondered if she could ever forgive James, if she could ever trust him again after everything that had happened. In the long, lonely nights at the hotel, James couldn't stop thinking about the past, about the happy moments he had shared with Emily and their children. He recalled the day he first met Emily at a friend's party. She wore a light blue dress, her hair softly curled, and her smile radiant. He had been instantly captivated by her warmth and intelligence. They had talked all night, and from that moment, they began a journey filled with sweet memories. James thought about the trips they had taken together, the evenings they spent walking on the beach, and the laughter they shared when Lucas and Sophie were little. He remembered the day Sophie took her first steps, how Emily had been moved to tears. Those memories now felt like sharp blades cutting into his heart, reminding him of everything he had lost. James realized he had become so consumed with work and daily pressures that he had forgotten what mattered most: his family. He had allowed himself to be swept up in temptation and had lost sight of the values he once cherished. He had betrayed Emily, the woman who had loved and supported him unconditionally. And now, as he recognized the gravity of his mistakes, he feared it might be too late. Meanwhile, Emily couldn't stop reflecting on the past either. She remembered the early days of their marriage, when their lives were filled with happiness and hope. She recalled the nights they stayed up talking until dawn, sharing dreams and plans for the future. But now, all of that seemed to have disappeared. Emily felt as though she was standing at a crossroads, to try to forgive and move forward, or to let go and start anew. After many sleepless nights of thinking and heartache, Emily decided she needed to bring everything into the open. She couldn't continue living in doubt and pain. She needed to know if James was truly willing to change and start over, or if his words were nothing more than empty promises. Emily arranged to meet James at a small cafe near their home. When James arrived, he saw Emily sitting at a corner table, her expression calm yet tinged with weariness. He knew this was going to be an important conversation, and he needed to be completely honest with her. "Emily, I know I've done wrong, and I don't know how to make things right, but I truly love you and the kids. I'm willing to do anything to earn back your trust," James said, his voice filled with regret. Emily was silent for a moment. Then she looked directly into James's eyes. "Do you understand what you've done to me and the kids, James? You've destroyed all the trust one ever had in you. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give it another chance for Lucas and Sophie," she said, her voice breaking slightly. James felt a wave of relief wash over him. He knew he had been given a second chance, and he was determined not to waste it. "I'll do whatever it takes to make things right, Emily. I promise you," he said, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope for their future. Emily nodded. Though she knew the road ahead would be far from easy, there was much work to be done to mend the wounds, and she wasn't sure if they could ever return to how things used to be. But at the very least, she was willing to try, because she still loved James and didn't want to give up on the family they had built together. The changes in James and Emily's relationship didn't just affect the two of them, but also left a noticeable impact on the lives of their two children, Lucas and Sophie. During the past tense weeks, Lucas and Sophie had felt the growing distance and tension in their home. The laughter and cheerful conversations that once filled their dinner table had been replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence, although Emily and James tried to shield the children from their conflict. The truth was that Lucas and Sophie both knew something was wrong. Lucas, with his sensitive and observant nature, had asked Emily several times why his dad no longer joined them for dinner and why he wasn't home in the evenings. He had witnessed arguments between his parents, and though they always tried to reassure him that it was just a misunderstanding, he couldn't shake his unease. He missed the afternoons when his dad would take him to soccer practice and cheer for his every pass. Now, James's absence on the sidelines was a void Lucas couldn't ignore. Sophie, younger and less aware of what was happening, still felt her dad's absence. Every night, as Emily tucked her into bed, Sophie would ask, "Will Daddy come home tonight, Mommy?" Her innocent question felt like a knife to Emily's heart. All Emily could do was smile faintly and reply, "Daddy's busy with work, but he loves you very much." Emily knew she couldn't let the situation drag on any longer. James's absence was taking a toll on the children. Lucas had become quieter, less enthusiastic about his daily activities, and Sophie was having more trouble falling asleep at night. Emily realized that, no matter what decisions she ultimately made, the most important thing was to protect her children from the emotional turmoil they didn't deserve to endure. Emily decided it was time to have a conversation with Lucas and Sophie. She chose a quiet Sunday afternoon, during a walk in the park near their home. After playing and enjoying ice cream together, Emily guided the children to a bench under a tree. She pulled them close, wrapping them in a warm hug, and said gently, "Lucas, Sophie, Mommy needs to talk to you about Daddy." Lucas looked at her with worry in his eyes, while Sophie tilted her head in curiosity. Emily took a deep breath and continued, "Daddy and I are going through some difficulties right now. Sometimes, grown-ups face problems that they need time to work through. Daddy and I are trying to figure out what's best for our family. But I want you both to remember, no matter what happens, Daddy and I love you more than anything in the world." Lucas was quiet for a moment before he said, "I just want our family to be happy like we used to be, Mommy." Emily felt her heart clench as she hugged Lucas tightly and replied, "I want that too, sweetheart. Daddy and I are doing our best to make that happen." While Emily did everything she could to shield the children from harm, James was also grappling with an intense inner struggle. He knew he had deeply hurt Emily and shattered the trust she had placed in him. The weight of his regret was immense, and he realized that no apology could erase the pain he had caused. James decided to end his relationship with Ashley once and for all. He arranged to meet her at a small cafe, the same place where they had once spent time together in the early days of their affair. As he sat across from Ashley, he no longer felt the excitement that had once drawn him to her. Instead, he felt only emptiness and lingering pain. He knew this was the right thing to do. "James, is something wrong?" Ashley asked, noticing the shift in his demeanor. "I can't do this anymore, Ashley," James said, his voice resolute. "I've hurt Emily, and I can't keep deceiving my family. This has to end." Ashley was silent for a moment, a hint of disappointment flashing in her eyes. "I understand," she said softly, managing a bittersweet smile. "I hope you find your happiness again, James." After parting ways with Ashley, James felt as though a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. However, he also understood that this was only the first step in his journey to regain Emily's trust. He knew he needed to prove, through actions and not just words, that he was truly committed to change and ready to do whatever it took to repair the damage he had caused. After weeks of separation, Emily and James decided to meet and discuss the future of their relationship. Emily knew she couldn't continue living in pain and doubt forever. She needed to make a decision about her marriage. She agreed to meet James at the park where they had once spent time together during the early days of their relationship. When James arrived, he saw Emily sitting on a bench, gazing out at the lake. He walked over and sat beside her. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me," James said, his voice full of sincerity. Emily turned to look at him, her expression contemplative. "What do you want to say, James?" she asked, her tone no longer cold but still cautious. "I know I've hurt you and the kids, and I don't know if I can ever make up for what I've done," James said, his voice breaking slightly. "But I truly love you and our children. I want to come back, to have the chance to fix everything, to be the husband and father that you and the kids deserve." Emily looked into James's eyes and saw genuine remorse and pain. She knew he was trying, and a part of her wanted to believe that he could change. "Do you understand that forgiving you won't be easy for me, James?" Emily said, her voice trembling. "I need time, and I need you to prove that you really mean it." James nodded, his gaze steady and filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes, Emily. I will never hurt you again. I promise." Emily took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll give you a chance, James, but we need to take it one step at a time. And you have to understand that it won't be easy." James smiled, a faint but relieved smile. "Thank you, Emily. I won't let you down again." After their emotional conversation in the park, James and Emily decided to embark on a journey of healing for their marriage. They both knew it would be a long and challenging process, but they were committed to making the effort for their family and for Lucas and Sophie. James began attending individual therapy to better understand the reasons behind his susceptibility to temptation and how he had lost sight of his values. He also agreed to participate in couples therapy with Emily. These therapy sessions were far from easy. They had to confront the hurt, disappointment, and pain they had caused each other. Yet, it was through these sessions that James and Emily gradually came to understand one another better. Uncovering each other's deep-seated desires and fears, James made a concerted effort to change how he treated Emily. He started helping more with household chores, taking Lucas and Sophie out on weekends to give Emily some time for herself. He also made an effort to truly listen to Emily, focusing on understanding her instead of being absorbed in his own concerns. He knew that rebuilding Emily's trust required action, not just words. Emily, though still grappling with lingering doubts and hurt, slowly began to open up to James. She started to see that he was genuinely trying to change and decided to give him the opportunity to prove it. She also took steps to better understand herself and what she needed in their marriage. She knew that forgiving James would require her to let go of the pain and anger that had weighed her down for so long. Lucas and Sophie, while not fully understanding the complexities of the situation, felt the positive changes in their family. James became more present in their lives, cheering Lucas on at soccer games and participating in Sophie's ballet practices. Family evenings once again became filled with laughter, and both Lucas and Sophie seemed happier. One evening, after putting Lucas and Sophie to bed, Emily and James sat together in the living room. James looked at Emily and gently took her hand. "I know this road will be long, and I know I've caused you a lot of pain, but I will never give up on you or our family," he said softly. Emily smiled, a gentle yet determined smile. "We'll get through this together, James. I won't give up either." They looked at each other, their eyes reflecting love, hope, and a shared resolve to rebuild what had been lost. The journey ahead would not be easy, but they were ready to face every challenge together to bring happiness back to their family. Rebuilding their relationship was not an easy journey, and James and Emily faced many new challenges along the way. Although they had both decided to forgive and start anew, the scars in their hearts were not easily erased. James did everything he could to show that he had changed. From participating in family activities to caring for Emily and the kids, he often took Lucas to soccer practice, helped Sophie with her dance routines at home, and spent time cooking with Emily. He knew that every small moment was an opportunity to prove his love and sincerity. However, not everything went smoothly. One Saturday afternoon, while James and Emily were preparing dinner together, James's phone unexpectedly rang. Ashley's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, James felt his heart stop, and he could tell that Emily had seen the name as well. The atmosphere in the kitchen grew tense. James quickly declined the call and looked at Emily, his expression filled with unease. Emily said nothing, but she put down the knife and left the kitchen without a word. James knew this was a significant test of the trust Emily had slowly been rebuilding. He felt as though he was standing on the edge of a cliff, where even the smallest misstep could undo all the progress they had made. James decided to follow Emily upstairs. She was sitting on the bed, staring out the window, not turning around when he entered the room. He took a deep breath and approached her. "Emily, I'm sorry," James said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't know why she called me, but I haven't been in contact with Ashley. I ended things with her completely. I want you to know that I would never do anything to hurt you again." Emily turned to look at James, her eyes reflecting pain and doubt. "James, I want to believe you, but things can't just change overnight. I need time to be able to trust you again." James nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "I'll be patient, Emily. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I'm worthy of your trust." After the incident with Ashley's call, James knew he needed to do much more to rebuild the trust Emily had lost. He understood that it wasn't enough to make promises. He had to prove his love and remorse through his actions. James began making small but meaningful changes. He decided to leave his old company, where he had met Ashley, and look for a new job. He knew the old company carried too many painful memories and temptations he didn't want to face again. James wanted to start fresh, not just with his family, but also with himself. Emily noticed the changes in James and began to sense the sincerity in his actions. James made a conscious effort to spend more time with the family, taking Emily and the kids out for activities and creating new memories together. He also made it a priority to talk to Emily, listening to her more attentively and sharing his own thoughts and feelings. Every day, they worked on having open conversations, not just about daily matters but also about their emotions and their hopes for the future. Although there were still moments of tension and doubt, James's persistence and efforts gradually helped him regain Emily's trust. She saw that James truly wanted to change and was willing to do whatever it took to rebuild their family. Emily, too, began to feel a renewed connection with James, a connection founded on honesty and a mutual commitment to healing their wounds. One evening, after tucking Lucas and Sophie into bed, James invited Emily to the backyard, where he had set up a small, intimate dinner just for the two of them, under the soft glow of string lights and flickering candles. James took Emily's hand and looked into her eyes. "Emily, I know I've hurt you, and I know what I've done can't be easily forgiven. But I want you to know that every single day, I'm doing my best to be the husband and father you and the kids deserve. I love you, and I will never give up on you," James said, his voice filled with emotion. Emily smiled as tears welled up in her eyes. She held James's hand tightly and whispered, "I know, James. I know you're trying, and I'll keep trying too. We'll get through this together." In that moment, beneath the gentle glow of the lights, they both felt a sense of hope for their future, a shared determination to rebuild their love and their family, no matter how long the journey might take. After months of tension and effort, James and Emily's family gradually rediscovered joy and happiness. The wounds in Emily's heart hadn't completely disappeared, but she felt she had been able to let go of much of the pain and open herself up to James again. She saw his perseverance and determination, and it gave her a sense of reassurance. The family decided to take a vacation to create new memories and leave behind the sorrow of the past. They chose a small beach house where they could enjoy the fresh air and peaceful moments together. Lucas and Sophie were thrilled about the trip, and their excitement spread to James and Emily. During the vacation, they spent time playing on the beach, building sandcastles, and barbecuing outdoors. James and Emily had quiet moments together, watching sunsets and sharing thoughts and dreams for the future. James promised Emily that he would never hurt her again, and Emily promised to keep working on forgiving and trusting him once more. One evening, the family gathered around a campfire. Lucas and Sophie told funny stories and laughed heartily. James looked at his children, then at Emily, and felt his heart fill with happiness. He knew the road to fully regaining Emily's trust was still long, but he also knew he wasn't walking it alone. He had Emily and the kids by his side, and that was all the motivation he needed to keep trying. Emily looked at James and smiled. She knew there was still work to be done to fully rebuild the trust that had been broken, but she also felt hopeful for the future. She understood that as long as they loved each other and were willing to put in the effort, they could overcome any challenge. After their vacation, James and Emily returned home with a renewed sense of positivity. They knew that rebuilding trust and happiness wouldn't happen overnight, but they were ready to face the challenges together. What they had gone through had helped both of them grow, deepening their understanding of the value of family and love. James continued to make every effort to show his love for Emily and the kids. He spent time listening to Lucas talk about his future plans, helped Sophie practice new dance moves, and frequently cooked meals with Emily. He understood that love wasn't just about words. It was the small, everyday actions that truly mattered, the ones he had once taken for granted. Emily also worked on opening her heart, forgiving, and trusting James. She knew that, in order to move forward, she had to let go of the pain of the past and focus on the positive aspects of the present. She felt that James had genuinely changed, and that gave her hope for a brighter future. One weekend evening, as the family sat together watching a movie, James looked around the room and felt his heart overflow with happiness. He knew life wouldn't always be smooth, and there would still be challenges to face. But what mattered most was that they were together, still loving and supporting one another. Emily leaned against James's shoulder, smiling at their children. She reflected on the long journey they had been through, one filled with tears and pain, but also with forgiveness and love. She felt hope for the future, a future where their family would continue to stand by each other, overcoming difficulties and building happiness together. Lucas and Sophie laughed and played, unaware that what they were experiencing was the result of their parents' arduous journey of effort and resilience. But that was exactly what Emily and James wanted, for their children to grow up in a home filled with love and joy, free from the shadows of tension and hurt. They held each other's hands, looking toward the future with love and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, James and Emily knew they could face them, because they had learned the most valuable lesson. Love requires forgiveness, patience, and, above all, unwavering commitment to one another. And so, their lives continued, filled with renewed hope and a love reborn. It was a journey full of challenges, but also full of meaning. A journey James and Emily were ready to embrace, having rediscovered how to love and cherish one another once more.